Welcome to That's Effin' Weird. Tonight we have a very fun episode. Clark is going to head it all off. It's going to be Collapse of the Bronze Age. We have a whole bunch of guests tonight. We have the nightclub yet again. Their links will be in the show notes, so check them out. It's an amazing podcast, really fun people. They do deep dives on horror movies and a lot more, so check them out. But Clark, everybody can introduce themselves, and then Clark's just going to take it away.
Nightclub podcast. I'm Travis Maxwell Boone. We were on here recently and fucking love being back. We've also got from the nightclub, Mr. GHZ, Grindhouse Zombie, who was on here before.
Hello. Yes, happy to come here. Happy to finally be on a podcast where we can talk like intelligent people. It's such a breath of fresh air for the nightclub.
and we
speaking
also
of intelligent people, we also have me. I'm Ricky.
Oh, that was so smooth.
I'm part of the nightclub podcast. I make it good. For the most part, I make it good.
100% do, baby.
No, this is my first time on the show, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, Ricky is our visual effects expert. He can fake vomiting and diarrhea like nobody. It is beautiful.
It's so real. It's fake.
Yeah,
right.
It's amazing. And we also have tonight with us.
Be looking out for my mixtape. It's Stephen Kingpin's NY Rick. You'll love it. Trust me. You might not get it. Your kids will love it.
Beans and Lily, you guys are up to introduce yourselves.
Oh, hi. Yes. And I'm Lily, of course. Back at it again with another banger.
Oh, yeah.
And I am just a humble being. You can call me Steph. It's nice to meet you guys.
Steph Beans, who's also part of the fucking nightclub Discord, jumping around from the DBS Discord. Hell yeah. So want to represent that Beans. Beans been up in there. We're all glad to be here, I think.
Yeah.
I'm speaking for a few people, but yeah, That's Effin' Weird is dope as fuck. And thank y'all for having us back.
Anytime.
Thank you for being here.
And Clark, the floor is yours, sir.
I would like to say welcome again to the nightclub. And today we're talking about the collapse of the Bronze Age, but I didn't want to get like dry and into all the weeds of like names and dates and all this kind of stuff. You know, we're going to have dates and names, but I didn't want to like just do a historical thing. So because your niche is movies, I'm going to pitch this to you as a movie script, something I want to sell. I feel like this will be best to actually describe this. And if I were to title The Collapse of the Bronze Age, I would title it as Greek Mythology, An Angry Mountain, and the Bible. And that's what we're going to discuss tonight. So I guess we should just start with, what is the Bronze Age? You guys have already kind of joked about it. We've talked about it. We know how bronze is made. It's copper and tin. Who smelted it first? We don't know. We do know that the Greeks and the Chinese were probably the first people to figure it out. And it's about 3,300 to 3,000 BCE. So that's where we're starting. But our story is going to start at 1700 BCE. So this is basically the height of the three biggest empires in the world at the time. We have the Assyrians, we have the Hittites, and we have the Egyptians. Obviously, the Egyptians need no introduction. At this point, they're in the Middle Kingdom. They're kind of in their Renaissance. So this is not pyramid building Egypt, but this is like the big temples and like a lot of the ornate statues and things like that. Ramses II, that era of Egypt. Hittites, a lot of people don't really know about them. They're kind of a conglomeration of city-states in what is now modern-day Turkey, Syria, and Jordan. So they kind of have that whole area. You might want to pull up a Google map if you want to see where this area is. Egypt at this point, their empire goes up to what is modern-day Israel and Lebanon. So that's where they're bordering. That's kind of the these two empires are kind of vying over this area. And Egypt being over modern, or what's Canaan, which is modern-day Israel, is going to come back. It's going to be very important. So keep that in mind. The third empire is Assyria, and Assyria is not really going to play a big part in this because they're in the interior and they are in modern day Iraq, and they are kind of safe from everything that's about to happen. So the collapse of the Bronze Age, there's a lot of unanswered questions, and historians are still debating over it to this day, but it's basically a 400-year period where everything goes to shit. So you basically have these empires. They have trade routes. They're wealthy. Agriculture is amazing. Like there's surplus of food. Everything is going swimmingly. And then in a 350 to 400-year period, everything absolutely goes to hell. You had a question?
They have from what I'm like reading now, because I'm not learned about this. They had, and it echoes what we have today, based on if you pay attention to the news or mainstream media, whatever. Natural catastrophes, climate change, internal rebellions, invasions, disruption of trade relations, and systematic collapse. So, sounds like a lot of shit we're dealing with now.
Absolutely. This is a lesson to be learned. This is a mini apocalypse. I mean, so this is definitely, it's easy for us to look back in 20th century problems and see World War I, World War II, Cold War, things like that. It's easy us first like to look back at that and be like, oh wow, that was, shitty. We have evidence of it. We have video of it. We have pictures. We have things like that. You look back to an age like this where the documents are sparse at best, and you have to kind of piece together what the hell happened. But it's the same problems that you see civilizations facing all the way up till today. So same thing Rome faced, same thing. I mean, any great civilization that has fallen, you're going to see the same things happen. And this is a very like foreboding tale of the collapse of the Bronze Age. And I think it's just, I think it's interesting that we just have so many questions and we want to fill in the gaps. But ultimately, the lesson is we should probably pay attention because the same things can happen to us at any given time.
Seems to be the case. Like nowadays, with the similarities being fucking again natural catastrophes. This one calls for earthquakes. At least the article that I'm reading, we have those going on to a degree, and the climate change thing that makes me take pause because I know what's going on currently in our current political spectrum, where they have this bill that they're wanting to pass, where the I believe it's the World Economic Forum, or maybe it's the World Health Organization, the WHO, can control certain vectors, certain areas, whatever you want to call them, and decide what a climate change catastrophe is. Internal rebellions, I mean, we're seeing that right now in the U.S., at least as far as like the left and right war is going on, where people are so like they're ready
So
to
dumb.
fucking they're they're dumb, but they're ready to fight for their side. Like they're ready to like at all, no holds barred, whatever the cost may be. I'm gonna stay steadfast to my side and let that fucking happen. Invasions, we right now we're dealing with I say we, but our economy's paying for it, I guess. But I don't know the ins and outs. I stay on the peripheral of all this. But we have the Ukraine invasion from Russia, disruption of trade. I'm hitting all the points. I mean, that's happening left and right, I think, for the United States. And again, I don't stay up to date on all this. I'm just speculating. So those are my 5 points I'm speculating on and why that relates to Bronze Age. So, and I'll shut the fuck up now.
No, these are things you should pay attention to because, like I said, they, all of them, this is a tale that literally will show you how one thing can topple all of the dominoes. And like things can go south really quick. So, We're going to start, like I said, at about 1700 BC. Right now, we're at the height of everything. Egypt is swimming. The Hittites are swimming. Fucking everybody is doing good. The Greeks are still kind of like doing their thing as a semi, confederation of city states and things like that. And then one of the big moments here is that in 1700, between 1700 and 1650 BC, we know that the Israelites start migrating into Egypt. So this is the biblical story of Joseph. This is going to be important, obviously. So different records say different things. Some say, Egypt, like Egyptian records say that they took 120,000 people from Canaan. Now they did have Canaan as a vassal state, at this point. This was the end of their border of their empire. They say they took 120,000 as prisoner. Seems like an excessive number, honestly, for that time. And then what we do know is that a lot of them immigrated into Egypt because of the fertile soil and the abundance of food. This is going to be extremely important. Also, at this time, like I said, the Hittites have kind of consolidated all of their power. They've always had internal struggles to keep their kind of empire together, but now they've kind of consolidated all of what is now modern day Turkey, Anatolia, all the way down to Jordan, Syria. So the empires are set basically, and everybody's rich at this point, and it's good. So now we can fast forward about 350 years. And this is where everything goes to hell. We're going to start with the island of Thera in the Aegean Sea. Has a volcano on it called Santorini. And Santorini decides to blow its top in fantastic fashion.
When it blows up, is it like, I ain't got no Santeria, I ain't got no crystal ball?
No Santorini. So yeah, it basically the first wealthy nation that's self-sufficient that bites the dust here is the Minoans. So if you know your Greek mythology, you know the Minotaur, things like that. These are the Minoans. They basically become non-existent after this eruption. They get a buffet of natural disasters. They get tsunami, they get earthquakes, they get ash clouds, they get all of Santorini. Basically, they get all of the hell. And the Minoans are pretty much off the historical record after this. So
Interesting.
they're done. So they're the first ones to pretty much fall.
Interesting though how you have people that are in what you could almost describe as a paradise, right? And if you look at modern day now, you look at, say, our various coastlines, things like that, where we've got people that have enormous wealth and that have collected in a certain place. And they're also the people that are most subjected to, although I'm not sure that they know it, but most subjected to a potential catastrophic event, whether it be an earthquake, whether it be a hurricane, whether it be tornadoes, typhoons, tsunamis, whatever else. Interesting that throughout history, the people that have collected in places that I think are the most desirable to live and to breed and to, go forth into life are also the people that are the most likely to get the old hammer stroke right to the behind when things go south.
Yeah, the most beautiful places are also the most geologically unstable places.
And all this talking about breeding and hammer stroking, Grindhouse, man, you're doing it for me, bud.
Well, I think it's a hard reality. You look at it now. I mean, especially like a lot of the places in Europe now that are, I think, that are the most beautiful. You look at like the beaches of Monaco and things like that. They're also the ones that are the most subjected to what I think ultimately are natural phenomenon, but people chalk up to a bunch of different things. But at the same time, it's, the old golden rule: whoever has the gold makes the rules, right? And this is where we're going to be. This is where we're going to live. The rest of you will live down the mountain and do me a favor and bring me up a pail of water every day because I'm going to need it. But I don't think a lot of things are all that different today.
So let's look at number 2 here on the hit list is the Hittites. Hittites now they've always been struggling with internal strife. So the Santorini eruption is going to cause more problems because now you also have famine, you have crops not, growing like they used to. Your people are going to start getting a little mad, and they have a plague breakout. And what's sad about the Hittite Empire is it's so spread out at this point that communication is terrible. So their capital, Hattusha, is actually going through some civil strife, and they have a plague break out in the city, and it actually kills their king. And one of the great historical mysteries, I guess the first really good historical mystery we're going to bring up here in this story, is a new enemy arises. Whether it was driven about because of volcano and because of famine and stuff, but a enemy called the Sea Peoples.
The fucking Sea Peoples. Oh my god.
I was gonna bring up the Sea Peoples because there's a lot of contention as to who they were.
Who they
Right.
were, where they came from.
It was Kevin
Right.
Costner, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So-
Kevin Costner for sure.
Here's
I also wanted to ask: Are the Cushites involved in this a lot? I'm a little fuzzy. Are the Cushites involved in all this?
So they're farther inland.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
Were they
But-
growing Kush? Is that where we get Kush from?
I hope so.
I'm just now putting that
I hope,
together.
and I hope they're okay.
They smoked themselves out of existence.
There are some famous people that are, I guess, associated with the Sea Peoples that we know for a fact were probably part of them. But this is what is fascinating. So this group called the Sea Peoples, and historians hate using that term because they were a confederation of both sea and land peoples that kind of just bonded together and said, we're going to find a new place and we are willing to be violent to settle. So these existing empires that are already kind of like suffering because they're the biggest thing they have going for them is the fact that they have food and people want food. And now all of a sudden they have famine and they don't have as much food as they used to. And now these people are coming in and they are militarily advanced and, like I said, willing to take what they want. But this is where history doesn't know exactly where they came from. We know one of the tribes for sure, and that's the Philistines. That's the ancient, obviously, if you know your Bible history, that's the Israelites' ancient enemy, the Philistines. So they will come back again here later in our story. But
Yeah, they came with that hood shit.
Yeah.
they
Why
did.
did the Brits use a Philistine as a slur? Were they like were they known for something?
Well, like I said, they were the ancient enemies of the Israelites in the
Okay.
Bible. If you look at, Exodus and obviously Joshua, any of the campaigns of the Israelites reconquering Canaan, the Philistines, Judges, obviously, another book that constantly references them. They were kind of they were kind of like the big bad
Okay.
of the, early Old Testament kind of like reconquest of Israel, of Canaan at the time. So we know for a fact that they are some of the Sea Peoples, but the rest of them, we don't really know where they came from. But
Yeah, I
apparently
know there's speculation to like all kind of places.
They think Sardinia, they think Sicily, even like they might have been proto.
I've even heard people saying like proto Germanic,
Yep.
like all kind of shit. So
Well, that's the thing is it's crazy. They've done archaeology, they've done genetic, research on actual Philistine. Like they know for a fact it's a Philistine skeleton and it has European descent.
mhm.
So the fact that they were in Canaan, in Israel, fighting the Israelites in 1200 BC, 1100 BC, it's crazy to think they have European descent. So
It's just crazy to think that people back then fucking moved around that much.
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Is it?
You
Is
know?
this, could this possibly be Viking predecessors?
That's one of the theories that
Yeah,
some
a
of
lot
them
of-
may have been.
Travis,
Yep.
I think you're muted. I can't tell. I can't. When you speak, I can't hear anything.
That's what I
Right.
was gonna say. Is that
Oh.
that I was gonna say the same thing. Is like, is this a Viking prelude right
Oh,
now?
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
like are we getting to Viking shit? Because yeah, dude, like, and I'll have some other things to throw in there later, but at this point in history where we know the seafarers and they're coming over. Look, Seth is laughing. He's dying.
No, I was resting my chin. This plate is killing my back, and so I'm just using it as like a resting bridge.
I love that you're dedicated to this thing.
I am.
that
I'm
you're
not.
doing.
I'm not. I'm not. I'm here for content. I'm not putting any of this up.
This is awesome.
We
Yeah.
can
So
follow
I'm
up
sorry to
afterwards.
derail. Yeah.
Well,
My
no,
bad.
it's always funny with the various societies and how and I think Clark said it when things go to hell, right? Um, at first you have people fighting over cities and gold and whatever else. And then you have people fighting over walls, and then eventually you have people fighting over farm fields because people have to eat, right? Um, this cycle is repeated through history. It's repeated more times than I think we can even care to count. Um, Back here in the Bronze Age, and as the different groups learned to do what they could do with the metal, and made better weapons, and they had better armor, and they better kind of everything, better tools, whatever else. The funny part about a lot of this is that, and again, Clark said this, people were so spread out and so disbanded that often you had people from neighboring places fighting each other, and they just didn't know they were fighting each other, you know? And it's like when the battle was over, and people would be like, oh, hey, there's Bob. I know Bob. Shit, I bought my stuff. Why are we fighting? And people are like, I don't know.
Margaret, I'm
Like, look-
sorry I wiped out your husband.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, then Margaret would become your wife. That's how it worked. back-
Nice. Margaret, I
Yeah.
wiped out your husband. I do have a spare room.
Yeah. Sorry. How would you like to shack up?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
It's the true.
So, and that's the thing about the Sea Peoples also is they weren't just a military force. They weren't pirates. They weren't raiding. They brought women and children with them everywhere they landed. So they were trying to settle.
Colonize. Hmm.
Yeah, they were settling.
Yeah.
And That's
That's
the
what they were
crazy-
doing. Yep, they brought their whole group, their whole philosophy, their whole lifestyle, everything else with them, and were trying to find a new place for it. And there were places that it definitely worked out well, and places that it didn't work out so well. But that was the constant siege thing. And I think once you become a seafaring people and you are out and you're on the water, I think that it becomes your goal, but I think it also changes the overall architecture of what you're doing. Whereas I'm not coming to a land with a boat full of soldiers to take you over. I'm coming to your land with a boat full of everything I've ever seen, owned, and done in my life, and we're going to settle here. And I think it's a different kind of fight.
Very much so. So we're going to go into why the Hittites fall now, the second empire that is going to drop here. So the Sea Peoples start landing in these places, and one of the major cities of the Hittite Empire is a city called Ugarit, and their governor, I guess you call him his royal governor. He doesn't have a title. He's not a prince. He's just kind of a royal governor. He's he directly responds to the king. of the
He's a
Hittite-
governor.
He's a governor. Hello,
He's a governor.
So he sends correspondence that we still have to this day. We can actually see his correspondence that he sends to the king of Cyprus and says, "The Sea Peoples have landed outside my city. What do I do? My navy is supposed to be returning, and the king won't respond to any of my messages." Well, little does he know at this point that Hattusha, the capital, is fucking obliterated. The Hittite capital has already fallen. It's already been sacked. So
He's
Is-
not returning my calls.
yeah, he's not returning my. Literally, he's getting ghosted. He's getting left on. He's getting left on red.
Your boy dead.
So he
He
sends
did.
out messages. He sends out messages to the king of Cyprus saying, "What do I do? They're here, and my navy hasn't come back yet. The king was supposed to send my navy back, and the navy is coming back from a place called Walusha. This will be important also later. So the navy never comes to help him. He's stuck there, and the king of Cyprus sends him back a message that says, if the Sea People are there, you should probably hole up in your city. Just close the gates, fucking batten down the hatches. It's not good. That's literally what he sends him back. We have this in writing.
Damn.
He sends another message back saying, "Do you have any word? Have you seen my navy anywhere? Where is my navy?" King of Cyprus sends another message back. By the time it gets to Ugarit, Ugarit has been sacked. It's done.
Oh shit.
So this is how fast the sea people are.
This is some Game of Thrones shit.
Is
Like,
this-
for
is-
real. Like
They are wiping everything out so quickly.
Is this why they go in various places in the Middle East, deserts, and there's like small, what we would call small now. They find like city walls every now and then. They'll just find stuff in the middle of nowhere. Are these all these tiny nations? Because I mean, compared to now, the pictures I've seen of some of these nations, they're relatively. It would be more like a town to us in terms of size, but they did have big fortified walls and stuff. But every now and then I'm watching like YouTube videos of just random discoveries in the desert, and they're just all these like kind of city state things with walls. Is that some of the stuff we find?
Yeah, that's pretty much like these empires are loose. Like I said, they are vassal states.
Yeah.
They are city states under one head that he's got the most men. It's almost like feudal lords. If the best way to compare it to like, you know, England, like medieval stuff is like you have feudal lords, you have one guy on top. He's got enough knights that he can actually kind of influence the rest of the area, and then those people kind of report to him, and it's like, oh, give me X amount of crops and stuff like that, and I'll protect you, and yada yada yada. And that's how your land grows. That's your territory.
what's crazy too is that they find these kinds of things in America as well.
Yeah.
Just saying, they find them.
Oh man, you opened the floodgates now. I at some point I want Clark to talk about the
They do find 'em.
Tennessee icebox. It's called, I think it's called the icebox. Basically, when the Corps of Engineers were putting in all the dams way back when in the early 90s, that they found tons of like 12,000-year-old civilizations, foundations, bones, pottery, trading routes. They just found them, and it's a lot in the southeast. There's a ton of them.
Yeah.
But it was just lost to time. But that shit was here.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic. But
sorry.
The biggest, well, obviously, you know, on the Mississippi River, that was like the hub. That was they have a huge city that we know was like the conglomeration point, but neither here nor there.
But back to the Middle East.
Yeah, back to the Middle East.
Well, I know too. I've read that in the Middle East and then in some of Northern Africa too. What I've read is that the seafarers are a reason that people are unearthing old wooden boats in the middle of a desert.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And it was because the seafarers in what we've been talking about brought everything with them, literally. Like these guys would drag a boat through the desert because they figured they would hit water eventually.
That sounds like Viking predecessors to me, like old predecessors.
Well,
a little bit, yeah. And if you live here in Minnesota, like you will live and die by your boat. So like I totally get it. Yeah.
So one of the groups that actually they think was also part of the Sea People's Confederation were Libyans. So like Proto-Carthaginians. So they think Tunisia, Libyan, like that era, like you were saying, the northern desert, the people that just like lived and died by the boat, basically. Because I mean, what was your option? To go to the interior? No. Yeah, you're gonna die in the Sahara if you went anywhere else. So that's literally what you lived and died by. But also the Viking theory of maybe more northern people that were driven more south. There was another eruption that happened at this time, another volcano, and it's called Hekla 3. It's Hekla is the volcano. It's in Iceland, but they call it the Hekla 3 eruption because it was the third major eruption that we know of that happened at this time. And it's between the Santorini eruption and this same fall of civilizations that we see going on. So we know Santorini happens, and then Hekla happens right after. So we get kind of double hit with all this, stuff like back to back. And it probably had an effect on those populations also. So, were people able to go that far and get there and then travel over to, the Middle East? It's possible. It's not impossible. We'll just say that. I'll take another ancient history thing here and say everybody knows Hannibal Barca. You know, Hannibal. He fought the Romans, right?
Mhm.
So nobody talks about what happened to Hannibal after he lost to the Romans. Nobody ever actually asks what happened to him. Well, he actually became a mercenary general, was hired by a lot of people, and ended up in modern day Turkey fighting as a mercenary general. Like, he didn't just die when the Romans beat his army and Carthage was burned. He actually used his services elsewhere and lived out the rest of his life in Eastern Europe. So, like,
I think a lot of people have done that over history, right?
I mean, yeah, I guess a lot of people are known for one thing, and then people forget that they lived out the rest of their lives. They did other stuff. So I think that's the big thing there. But going back to the Middle East, so the Hittites now, they've lost their capital. Hattusha is done. Ugarit has now been sacked by the Sea Peoples. And there's a third major city in the Hittite Empire, and it's called Wilusha. You guys have probably heard it by another name. It's called Troy.
Fuck yeah, boy.
And at this exact same time, in about 1300 BC, it falls and is burned. We all know the Greek mythology. We know the Battle of Troy. If you've not seen the Brad Pitt movie, if you haven't read
Love
the Iliad,
it. Love it. Love the
It's a great
Iliad.
movie.
Love that movie too. Great movie.
So, was it a 10-year siege? Maybe not. Was it a confederation of Greek city states? Were they the Sea People? That's another mystery. We just don't know. But we do know that Wilusha, Hattusha, and Ugarit were all defeated and razed to the ground at about the same time by a group of people known as the Sea People. And that's
Dude,
all we know as far as the historical record.
I like when it blends with the Hollywood shit too, though, because I'm like, look, yeah, I love this Hollywood ass movie, but there's real shit behind it all. And when I try to deep dive, again, I get lost in my own shit. That's why Grindhouse is telling y'all to shut me the fuck up. But I get lost in my own shit. So all this deep historical knowledge, fucking fascinated by, fascinated, love it. I love it to the nth degree. Then I'm sitting here wondering, when does it start making sense? Like, at what point?
Well-
We're still in the early Bronze Age, so I'm still here for it. But like, how far back are we gonna push this though? Because Clark, I know you're a student of history rather. This has been your forte. This is your thing. When people like Randall Carlson come along and fucking shake things up and fucking point out that like we're way older than we claim we are, how does all this narrative still fit into we're possibly older? Like, maybe I'm derailing too much, and if I am, shut me up, like Grindhouse is agreeing with. But you invited me here, so here I am, and here's my question.
All right.
Well, I
I
mean,
think
how
that's a very valid question to ask. In just relating to the story that you're presenting us, Clark, is how much uncertainty we have about history as we know it, and how much are we willing to deep dive and really just dissect everything we know and the records that we have to really find the answer. So I think it's a very valid question.
Well, I think it's insane at this point, and we're talking, like I said, between 1700 and 1300 BC. It's almost amazing that we are able to actually have enough documentation to even narrow it down this far, that we know in this like tiny 400-year period that we know the biblical Exodus, the Trojan War, and the Santorini, like the Minoan extinction, all happens at the same time, and it can't be not connected.
It's funny that we have the governor's text to the king that wasn't there. Like that we essentially have his text messages that the king never responded to. That's crazy, because like paper or those kinds of things are hard to come by that far back.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
And
it's also kind of amazing too when you think about people and you think about like our lifespans and going from generation to generation too. back then, people lived to be 40, 45 years old, right? So the space of 400 years might be 8, 9, 10 generations of people, whereas today it might be 4, maybe 5 generations of people, and that the history kept going. I mean, which is honestly kind of amazing. But at the same time, I mean, and to talk about Travis's point about, how old we might be and whatever else. I mean, we still, every day, if you pay attention on the news somewhere, somebody finds a treasure trove of coins, or somebody finds a sword in a river, or, somebody finds, a mastodon tusk sticking out of the permafrost. I mean, to think that we even understand a sliver of our history right now, I think is foolish.
Yeah.
And but I also believe that short of scraping down the entire Earth 60 feet all the way around and just going
Yeah.
down, I don't think we're ever actually going to know everything. But
I-
the writings that we have, the ancient things that we have, I mean, I think they do a fairly good job of at least painting the picture. Maybe we don't know all the details. We don't know, back in the Mesopotamian area or era, if, Tina fucked Gustav. We don't know. But in a more general sense, there's a lot of things that we do know. And, as a people, I don't think people put anywhere near enough thought into what our past was. And I'm thinking, probably to Clark's point, as we go forward, understanding it enough that we don't repeat history and basically doom ourselves.
Yeah.
I do want to point out one thing too. Also, talking about like we don't know how old we are. We have way more unwritten history about humanity than we have written history. You got to think that we are evolutionary like 250,000 years old. If you want to, if you subscribe to that, and
Are you
as far
talking
as,
about modern human?
yeah, like like Homo sapien, like what you think of as modern human, and then
And
we
it
have
keeps getting pushed back, though. It does. You gotta admit it
Hey,
does.
they just doubled the age of the universe.
Yeah,
I don't
they
know if you-
did.
Yep.
They were like,
Yeah,
"Whoops."
yeah.
Yeah,
This
they
is
were
why
like, oh,
this is why I'm not a big ass fan of mainstream narrative type thing, because I don't every time. Look, guys, and I'm sorry, and I know y'all doing the Bronze Age, and I'm not trying to fucking derail, but
we love
Nightclub.
to.
Let's
Bruh.
do it. Derail. Go for it. Well,
We love
Clark,
to.
Derail me, daddy.
Clark is laser focused. We'll get back on
Yeah.
track.
I'll
I'm
take
sorry.
that.
I will shut the fuck up then.
No.
No.
Say what you're gonna say. No, you're
We
good.
love tangents.
No, if you're gonna shut the fuck up, we need Grindhouse to tell you.
Okay, well,
Travis,
this
shut the fuck up.
this ain't his show, so fucking thank God. I think that we're learning slowly but surely, based on the works of Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock, the mainstream guys, right? The mainstream guys that are the most mainstream on telling us that our history is much older than it we think it is. That, and I'm all here for the Bronze Age stuff. Like I'm not a student of history. I'm a dumbass from fucking Louisiana, so trust me, I don't know nothing of what I'm saying. But from my personal looking at things and just my experience, I'm on the side of the fence that we're older than we think we are, and that we're more in tune with this planet or whatever realm we're inhabiting than we think we should be. I think we are being lied to about how close we are to this actual place where we're from. And I think we're being manipulated. Honestly, I really do. I think we're being manipulated and controlled to a degree to not fucking actually know where we are, what we're on, what we're a part of, how special we are as human beings, how special we all are, all of us, and what we can tap into if we really want to. How
Okay,
powerful we
I would
really
say
are if we
I
really
would
want to.
I would say to you, Travis, I would say to you, like I always do, I would say why. And don't answer now, wait. But I would say why, because right now I don't think there's anything to be gained from us being lied to. I think we talked last time, it, two reasons to keep a secret. Either you can't explain it or people can't get it. When it comes to the quote unquote ages of man, I mean, going from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. I mean, if you look at the Stone Age of man, the Stone Age of man is like 3.5 million years in the making. The Bronze Age is about 2,500 years, and then the Iron Age is about equal to that, give or take. But I think it also speaks to the evolution of man too, right? And how we only know what we know because somebody dug a hole in the ground and found something, right? So I think the definitions of what those ages are and what's what is constantly being redefined. So I don't see that as an object lie. I think it's what's accepted at the moment.
I think there's scholarly people who have established careers, and I'm saying this based on what other people who are part of this beyond me are saying that I listen to on podcasts. So again, I'm a dumbass. I'm just regurgitating fucking information. People that study this kind of stuff independently, like Clark does, come out and say later that, like, when I tried to tackle academia, mainstream academia, with my thoughts, me down so hard and fucking hated me and blah blah blah. I'm not saying Clark is saying that. I'm just saying, like, if independent researchers are fucking doing their thing, and then they tackle the Egyptologists that have been studying the pyramids for fucking 50 years, and they're like, hey man, can we finally see what's in the fucking grave that you claim this is a grave? And they're like, nah, bro, you can't. You kind of can't see what's in her. You kind of can't do it, or it's private.
Well, okay, yeah,
And
but
it's like we have this in multitudes, though. We have this over and over again, though, where there's people that are not letting things be explored, and we have outside independent researchers finding more bigger truths, and it becomes the mainstream narrative after a while. It takes a while, but eventually it's like it becomes part of the thing. And it's like, did everyone forget where we were 10 years ago? Because I didn't. I
okay,
did
well,
not.
you might be right, but using Egypt as an example, honestly, I think is flawed thinking. Only because when it comes to antiquities, Egypt is a very private country. They don't let information freely flow out. They give it out in dribs and drabs as they see fit. Most other countries, again, like say
You're
something
saying
like
it for me, bro. Keep going.
something like
Zahi
something.
well-
Hawass is an asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a fucking piece of
Exactly,
shit.
exactly. So, but I think
Well, then you're not saying it for me, then.
no, but what
You're
I'm saying
talking
to you is that
him.
Egypt is a country that very closely controls the narrative.
I
think
know.
with the rest of the world and the things that people continue to find. I'll go back to the example of, like a 12-year-old girl finding a Scottish sword in a river. Okay. I think most of us in the developed free countries honestly tend to be excited about these things. And I think that we tend to share these things because we're so they're well, hold on.
We are, but
wait,
they are not.
Wait.
He's,
Okay.
Look at him.
So, well, sometimes you just, Travis, shut the fuck up. Okay.
Because I'm already onto you, cuz.
No, I think a lot of countries honestly want to see these discoveries, and they want to see, Richard III, for example, in Britain. That was a big deal, and I don't think
yeah.
people covered that up. I think people were very forthcoming about that.
Are
So
you
I
talking
think
about
it
the
depends.
parking lot where they
Yes.
found him? Okay,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think depends on where you are, depends on how forthcoming you are about those things. And so while I do agree with you that there probably are some things that we don't know and some things that are hidden and we're not told. At the same time, I think here we are in 2023. I think people like me, for example, I think history is awesome. I want to learn as much as I can. I want to see the new things. I want to hear about the silver coins, and I want to hear about the ships that are found in the middle of a desert. And I want to hear about Scottish swords that are found in a river by a 12-year-old girl who was out hiking with her family. I want to hear about those things because they're fucking fascinating, and anyone that doesn't think history is fascinating is just not paying attention to life, because most of it is so beautiful, and there are so many things to be learned, and there are so many stories to be told, but as far as we're older or younger or things are being hidden. Yeah, you're right. You know what?
Being told every day, every
Yeah,
day.
see, but that's my point though. I don't necessarily subscribe to a lot of that, but I
True,
think
though.
that regionally there probably is some truth to that.
Yeah, yeah. Travis, to your point and to Grindhouse's point, and then we'll go back to Clark. The whole thing is, I do think there's some lying going around, but I think it's more pocketed. Like, I'm on both you guys' side. Like, I do think there's a bunch of weird stuff going on. I think that more to Grindhouse's point, it's like, for instance, Egypt. Egypt has a lot of reasons to like shut the fuck up about certain things. They, like, for instance, if they found like the Ark of the Covenant for a particular reason, then like that lays claim to like other nations, like Israel, for instance, of saying, well, we have stake in this discovery or that discovery.
But
So from the
brother,
top down, they've
based-
always done that kind of thing. I'm just saying from
based
the U.S.
on what
the
you
there,
know, based on what you know, they're covering this up for a lot more than that.
I think, okay, well, I also think that, for instance, like the whole Antarctic thing, I wouldn't put it past. I do think it's segmented though. I think that there are pockets. I think there are pockets.
You know what's going on, bro.
I think there
You
are crazy.
know.
No, hold on. I do think there are crazy things going on. I think that there are pocketed vectors of wealth and really specific interests that, all right, for instance, maybe it would be beneficial. Everyone knows something weird is going on with Antarctica. Maybe it would be beneficial to say that there's an ice wall or this or that to get people that are curious minded to stick to that while they have while they're doing other stuff there. I don't know what those things are. I'm just saying maybe some things are psyops and some things aren't. But I do agree there are weird things. But I do think that all the conspiracy and pocketed stuff is just pocketed.
Meanwhile,
sorry, Clark.
is like, yeah, I know. He's like, what the fuck are they talking about?
Way off topic,
These fucking assholes.
but not really. It kind of all goes
Yeah, I'm
together.
done, Clark. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
know.
Clark.
Sorry, I'm typing. Sorry, we're gonna edit out dead air. Hold on 1 second. I gotta get back so I can see you guys.
Oh, you're good.
There we go. Hey. All right, so the Hittites are efficiently done now at this point. They've been cut out. So now we're gonna move to Egypt, and now we can actually get to some also weird shit. So this will be fun for everyone, because now we're bringing the Bible into the mix.
Will you say that it will be effing weird?
It'll be
Would you
effing-
go as far as to say that?
I've been waiting for the Bible conspiracies. I want to hear this.
Perfect.
It's gonna be effing controversial. So
Oh.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
Even better.
Okay.
try to offend anyone here, but this is what's happening in Egypt while all this is going on. We know the Santorini eruption happened, right? So this is obviously a very geological unstable region. And at this point, by 1300 BC, the Egyptians have essentially lost control of the southern part of their empire to a people they call the Hyksos.
Oh,
This
is that
is
the
by-
weird crown?
So they do a double crown thing, and it's weird, but
Okay.
that's not the split kingdom. That's older than this.
Oh,
This
okay,
is
yeah.
so we actually have crossed from the middle kingdom of Egypt to the new kingdom era. So this is kind of the last hurrah of Egypt, and that's why this is the collapse of the Bronze Age. This is pretty much Egypt's
This
swan
is-
song.
Is
And
this
they-
when they tried to mimic all the fucking architecture and they couldn't actually comprehend how the civilization before them built everything, so they were copying it and they were doing it really fucked up and not as good?
They did stelae on the existing temples.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
That's. I know what you're talking about.
You're playing into my narrative. Thank you.
Here
I
are-
love you, Clark. Let's
Yeah,
go.
we're a couple thousand years removed from the pyramids, and probably a lot more thousand years removed from the Sphinx. But
Like
that's
like
another
post
for another
building.
time.
Post
Yeah.
building.
The
Okay.
but the
Yeah.
Sphinx is supposed to be way older now,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I'm saying. Is we're supposed to be. We're way 1,000 years after that.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, we're
okay,
not gonna.
okay.
Like I said, that's a whole nother topic. We'll get
All right, my bad, my bad.
But the Old Kingdom are the people who built the pyramids of Giza, and then you have the Middle Kingdom, and the Middle Kingdom is the ones that built like the Temple of Karnak and like all these like really famous big statues and things like that. And they actually the Middle Kingdom ends at about the time of our story started, about 1700 BC, and so the New Kingdom kind of starts then. So this is kind of the swan song for Egypt. They're never really going to recover. They're not going to get obliterated like the Hittites or the Minoans, but they're never going to be what they were ever again after this. So the Southern Kingdom is now comprised of a group of people called the Hyksos. That's what the Egyptians call them. The Hyksos are a Levantine and Semitic group, according to their own records. So we have to assume that is the Israelites, because we know it's been 350 to 400 years since they came in. So this is the biblical Exodus we are talking about right now. Hyksos actually are so powerful, they are kind of cohabiting Egypt. They literally are. So, the popular theory, and like I said, I'm not trying to offend anybody here, but the popular theory is that the Jews were enslaved by the Egyptians. From Egyptian records, they say these people, the Hyksos, they're Levantine, Semitic. They, worship the Israelite God, is what they say. They are actually cohabiting with them. And now they want out because there's no more food. Because the food is gone because of the Santorini explosion. They now have famine. And what is
I
this?
don't practice Santeria. No, I'm sorry.
But what is this starting to sound like to you? They want
The
out.
plagues.
Yeah. So, Seth, recently I told you to look up on Google Earth Lake Neos, right?
Yeah.
And I told you if you look at Google Earth right now, what does Lake Neos look like?
Dry.
No, it's red.
Oh. I don't remember looking up Lake Neos. I'm so sorry. I'm just being honest.
Yeah, in geologically unstable regions, what happens during a volcanic eruption is you have carbon dioxide that actually builds up under bodies of water, and it taints it with a red color.
Didn't that recently happen?
Yeah, that was 1986 when Lake Neos happened.
Okay.
Oh,
I know there was a glacier that bled red recently. That's what I was referring to, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So if Santorini erupted, it is not impossible that the Nile turned red, and that would be the river turning to blood.
All right.
And what happens when the river turns to blood? The wildlife will run from that river. So you have frogs, you have fish dying. What happens when things die? You have flies. What happens when you upset the agriculture because of famine? You have locusts.
What about the firstborns?
So
How's that?
in Egyptian culture, the firstborn had the privilege, quote, privilege. People actually lived in the upstairs. They lived in the second floor. The firstborn had the privilege to live on the first floor. It was just what their thing was. So when this carbon dioxide cloud, like Lake Neos, happens, this cloud of death literally, when it bursts out, and you have this carbon dioxide cloud that just covers the area, kills the livestock, and it's going to kill everybody at ground level. So the firstborns die.
Whoa.
That's dope.
Everybody that's on the second floor live.
So it's like those pockets in lakes where the CO2 gets too concentrated, all the fish just suffocate.
Yep.
But in dry land. Oh, that's crazy.
And like I said, all of you can go on Google Earth right now and look at Lake Neos in Cameroon, and it is red right now.
I'm doing it.
I just saw an article, I want to say today or yesterday, about a massive amount of fish dying and washing up ashore, but I don't think the sea turned red or the lake or the body of water turned red. So, damn, I'm sweating a little bit, not gonna lie.
So, like I said, it's not to shake anybody's faith or anything like that, or try to disprove anything, but it is
Yeah, yeah.
very possible that the
Well, that
Santorini
if
explosion.
anything, I think that makes someone's faith kind of more sense
More
to a
Yeah,
degree.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, same.
Because it's like the accounts were accurate. It's just explained behind dogma, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
all of like you can be a reductionist about pretty much anything. Like any way anything works, miracle or not, you can reduce it to its baser elements. It doesn't mean that it's
Mhm.
not crazy.
Right.
Yeah, no, I like what Clark is presenting here because it does give. I'm not religious, right? Like
I thought you were a Muslim.
I'm I'm going to adapt to one. But no, but for realness, I'm like agnostic atheist. I don't know. I'm open, but I'm like I'm not open to man-made religion dictating my life like type thing, but I'm open to people having their own religious perspective, and when certain things line up like how things line up like this is more evidence to me of like how shit gets passed down through the generations, whether you like it or not. It's like how close to home is this shit? Like
Yeah.
how it it happens more so than not. And it's weird. It's weird that it happens more so than not, I'll admit, as a non-religious person. How close things line up. But as far as a history, I mean, I I've only got I guess the Bible teachings to go off of as far as I know versus what I went through in school. Um a whole different topic. But
Well, but
yeah.
with the assumption that this follows the Bible, though, and the reality of the Bible not being a book written by one person, right? Ultimately, the Bible,
Multiple. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh
ultimately the
yeah,
Bible
yeah.
with its books, it was a compendium of different things.
Over
But it
tons
does,
of generations, also.
yeah, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it does make sense that people would experience a particular thing, call it a plague, call it whatever you want, and document their history. And just because, and this is just me being I'm not quite an atheist, but more or less. Um, a, a series of events that are unexplained, so they've got to be, you know, of a higher power, is not something that I necessarily subscribe to. It's honestly for me just people not knowing any better. But then when it comes to the Bible too, I mean, you've got a series of events, but then you've got a history of people too. And you take those series of events and you combine history of people, you can pretty much turn it into anything you want. I mean, it was, Spielberg couldn't have written this better.
Yeah, right.
Institutional religions can absolutely prey upon all what you just said. If you if you want to you like cosmic horror, I hear. The grapevine tells me you guys like cosmic horror. Read the Apocrypha, specifically the Book of Enoch, the Book
Enoch,
of
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah,
That's the
man,
best.
we
that
know,
stuff is
we
It's the
know,
best book.
terrifying.
baby.
It's the best
We
book.
already know, boy.
The stuff
Best
that
book.
Nightclub.
the
So-
Council
so
of
screaming.
Nicaea's cutting room floor, their edits. But
Right. We like the director's cut better.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Extended cut.
Yeah, there you go.
Gosh, we can go. We will reserve an episode to do a deep dive into the Bible.
I'm sorry. I'm
man,
so sorry.
Clark, please,
Yeah.
that would be amazing.
Bronze Age all day. I'm sorry. I feel
Well,
like I
but-
might have done that.
But to Clark's point, though, is that my point is not to impugn anyone and not to say that anyone is wrong either in their beliefs or their faith or whatever else. I think basically what Clark is trying to get to is that there's a history behind a lot of these things. And admittedly, when you get back, 50 years ago, we've got a pretty good history. 100 years ago, a pretty good history. You start getting to 500, 1,000, 1,200, and the history becomes spotty, right? You've got teachings, you've got writings, you've got hearsay, all these other different things. But how much of it is really like in stone? in stone. And I'm not talking like the 2 tablets stone, but like stone, where it's unequivocal. It can't be argued. And the farther back that you get, I think the more arguments you can have.
Mm.
I've
So
got some stones for you that you
What?
won't be able to argue with, bro.
you've only
I
got
think
one. You've only got one stone, but I
All
won't
it
argue with it.
takes. It's all
I
it
won't
takes.
argue with it.
I think also though something that's been kind of proven in this whole or no, I won't say proven. Nothing's proven, but something that we've said in this or the information I've given out, I don't know if anyone's actually realized yet, is that means the biblical Exodus and the Iliad happened at the same time.
Mhm.
They coincided, right?
Our perception of history is so skewed because when we read the Bible and especially the Old Testament, we think, "Oh my God, this is so long ago. This is so
But
forever ago." But no, biblical Exodus and the Iliad are like congruent. They're there at the
Yeah.
same
but
time.
wasn't the story of Gilgamesh before even the fucking biblical one?
Oh yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so we go
Yeah.
back even before that, where we had human history being laid out with Enki and Enkidu, right? And Gilgamesh, and we had shit before we even had shit. And so now we're again, I'm a dumbass, bro. That's why I'm just
I
trying
love
to
I love
fucking
that for it.
chime. I'm chiming in, but I feel like I've heard this shit. I've heard this shit. We got the story of Enkidu and Enki, and Gilgamesh is like Noah, right? It's the Noah flood. It's the same story. It's the same biblical story that we've heard over and over again. But this is the older version
But yeah,
that
all these stories are just told and retold and rebranded over since the beginning of time.
Christ Christ is another example of just it's just been told and told and told again with the 12 disciples and the fucking you're gonna be born on this dirt and like it's I've seen this throughout my life and I'm like, oh my lord, man, like what are we doing? What are we doing with human history? What are we really doing here? And lately I've been getting into this fucking shit. Grindhouse is about to say shut him up. And y'all know what I'm saying, so I'm gonna shut up.
Well, what I think is curious about, and something like the Bronze Age, where you had so many groups that learned, I mean, in terms of history, right, that learned so much so fast. But then when we talk about the falls of the different groups, I think when it comes to the metalworking, I think the Hittites were super into that and the things that they were into do. But what I think is really, I don't want to say funny because funny is not the right word. Interesting, like really introspectively interesting, is that as these groups passed on, and one fell. So one group came in, took over another group. More often than not, one of these groups really had the technology refined, and they were making tools, they were making weapons, they were making armor, shields, whatever else. But then ultimately, the guy in your group that knew the most about your technology was also part of the hierarchy that fell in the siege. So when things kind of settled and the dust settled, the technology, while still there, sort of suffered a setback. And you see that through a lot of, I know, going up into Europe and then heading over into the islands, especially like when they got into Ireland. Like Ireland was really late to the game when it came to the Bronze Age, with their introduction of like the flat axe and things like that. But there was so much happening that it was like the guy who was still in mainland Europe who knew how to make all these things probably was among the upper echelon, and when there was any kind of a strife, he ultimately got axed. But then like his page boy got drug along into the next place, and he knew a little bit about it, and so they sort of had to start rebuilding again. And I think that's really interesting amongst the history, how there was this rise, and then sort of fall, and not fall down to the base level, but fall a little bit, and then how things had to keep going and going, and especially with the alloying of copper and tin, there was a lot of places that got to the game sort of late, and I think it was because of a lot of these different societies falling that I like, because I I would kind of think now that like if we come up with a new technology in this day and age that we have, I would like to think that, outside of being a bloodthirsty corporate overlord, we tend to try to share technology so everyone's kind of on the same playing field. And back then it was definitely not that way. Like if I could get a step up on you and come in later and smoke your ass, that's awesome.
Hey y'all, I'm sorry to break this, but I have 3 kittens that just came into my backyard and are playing with me right now. I have 3 kittens
Aww,
that are playing with me. Look, y'all, look.
that is so
I want a
cute.
kitty.
Hold on.
Look,
Let me
You
let
got
me
to
do
take
this.
care
Where's
of
my-
him.
you can take my Kiki.
Show us the kitty.
I'm trying. I don't know how.
That's a nice fucking kitty, Rick.
If there was ever going to be a distraction, 3 kittens I approve.
That's
It'll be
fair.
like-
That's fair. Yep. Yeah. I'm not going to argue with that. I'm not going to argue with 3 kittens.
This is happening right now. These
We're
kittens
going
are
in
here.
go mode.
If you can
I don't
have
know how
3
to do it.
if you can have 3 kittens on your lap and one of them will suckle from your teat, I will just bow to you.
Look. Come on, kittens. Where'd y'all go? Oh my God, they ran
Bro.
away.
The
Oh,
kitties were
They
alive.
ran away.
the kittens
Oh.
were alive.
That's my
I'm sorry.
The cake is a lie. The cake is a lie. Yes.
The cake is alive. Yes, exactly. So I guess Clark, my question is for you: is it would you think that it's a fair assumption to believe that both the Iliad and the Book of Exodus, um, because I looked it up and it says that they were written pretty much around the same time as well, are exactly that? They're just different versions of the same story.
Well, no, I mean they're separated by hundreds of miles, obviously. So I think it's two different. I think it's two different stories, but they're also embellished. It's the way
Mhm.
told for their people at the time. Like a lot of
Okay.
history at this time, the problem with it in saying that history can't be trusted, it's not that
Right.
history can't be trusted, it's that history is definitely written to make the writer look good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's
So-
always,
So,
it's always
that's
written
like-
by the victor. That's why.
Exactly.
Right,
Well,
but to
just
bounce
say
off
that.
of that,
There's
could
a
it
new-
be because of the distance? You said it's 100 miles away, 2 different places. But would it be like, and this is just on, I guess, like the basis of speculation, would it be also like kind of a little okay to safe to assume that maybe it was like one of those instances of, telephone where the story started out here and then making its way and rounds to different locations, and then it's like this person heard it and the details changed, and so when it was actually written down, it was describing the same event because there's so many different similarities between the two. You could say that what is it, the Lord would be Apollo in the Iliad, correct? Would that be a possibility? Again, just on speculation alone.
It's possible that stories made their way around, but if these are so close, like generationally, I don't feel like the Greek mythos and the actual Hebrew Torah meet until later on.
Mm-hmm.
That makes any
Oh.
sense. So
Yeah, that does make sense.
I think the raising of Troy, Volusia, the Hittite city, maybe inspires later conquest of like Joshua and things like that, like maybe Jericho, Battle of Jericho, and things like that.
Right.
I did an entire course on the actual battles of Joshua as a military document and not as like a biblical story. And like conquest of Canaan is actually very interesting if you look at it from that perspective. And maybe some of those stories kind of lead into that because you can't ever really get away from the spiritual side of it. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like there's never a story where you can say this battle was definitively won without having that involved in it.
Right.
You can say, subterfuge, you can say sabotage, you can say spy work, and like it's brilliant how they actually conquered Canaan. But ultimately people are going to say God had a hand in it. And
sure.
that's similar with the Iliad. I don't think you're never gonna know what the actual document was. How was Troy razed to the ground? It was never a 10-year siege. Odysseus, the Trojan horse, all that stuff. Like, I mean, stuff that's just now, it's gonna always be ingrained in the zeitgeist kind of thing. It's just part of it now. It's always going to be something we talk about. The horns blowing outside of Jericho, the Trojan horse. They're now beacons. They're things that are just, we are so connected to as people. Like, we look at them as like, it might not be history, but we look at it as, I guess, something greater than ourselves kind of thing. Like, we look at that, like, that's the story.
Do you have any information on the Nephilim in Canaan, or any kind of giants? I'm such a sucker for giants.
That's fair.
Once again, my stance on this. It's I
Have we talked about
legitimately
giants?
feel, yeah, but I legitimately feel it's just people that were freakishly big for their time. I told you if I time traveled,
Oh yeah,
if I went back,
World War II. Yeah.
I'm 6'1".
Yeah.
If I went back 100 years, people would look at me and say, "You're a freak."
So the
There's-
land of milk and honey, like they were well nourished, big
Yeah,
people.
I mean that's the same thing. Okay, so the movie Avatar.
Yeah.
All right, it's kind of a retelling of Pocahontas, right? We can all agree on that.
It
kind of-
absolutely is.
All right. So Native Americans, obviously, I'm a third Native American. My dad is Native American. When Europeans came over, they met a people that had a high, like pretty much just a straight high protein diet. And they met people that were leaner and taller than them.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that is just what they ran into. So they saw Native Americans and they're like, look at these people. They're tan, they're tall, they're lean. What's going on? So Avatar. Look at the,
Yeah, you
That's
lean,
really what it is.
tall weirdos.
tall weirdos.
right.
That's literally what they ran into.
So they would like mark it on their map as some kind of crazy thing, and then now like a YouTube channel will be like, look, the people had eyes in their chest.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, but Beans makes a good point here, and I want to circle back a little bit here, talking about the story and how the story is told and how these various places are taken over, sacked, defeated, whatever. And I like how you put that, Beans. You talked about a game of telephone, right? So the story is told, and the story is told, and the story is told. How long does it take until the story is told to a person that has the capability of documenting the story? Because a lot. I mean, if you go through a battle, right? You go through a battle, and you have a castle, or you have a keep, or you have whatever, and people are getting murdered and slaughtered and whatever else. The odds are that the people that are going to survive that whole thing are probably not the most literate people. So they know the story and they were there. But how long does it take before they can tell the story to somebody who has the capability of documenting the story? I think that's a very interesting question, and I wonder how big a part that plays in history and what we know of history and the quote unquote documented history. Because we always hear the tagline that that the history is written by the victor. Okay, that's fair. That's definitely a fair thing. But a lot of times the victors were the soldiers with the shields and the swords, and not maybe the most literate and verbose people that you've ever met in your life. So maybe the stories are told and they're retold and they're retold, and by the time it gets to somebody who has the capability to document the story, maybe it's substantially different.
So like their side's academics.
Mhm.
I want to bring up a very fun cinematic version of this.
Okay.
Movie 300.
Ah, yeah.
I love the theory. If you watch 300 through the lens of thinking it is the guy who is retelling the story of Thermopylae,
Yeah.
it's all believable. That's not how the Battle of Thermopylae went. And obviously they weren't all like ripped with all the abs like up to their chin, stuff like that.
And
But
Beans is over there going, yes.
but
No.
if you look at
What?
it
Why me?
from- I can't remember the guy's name, but the one that is sent home, he's the one that's
Oh
like,
yeah,
please,
yeah. With the eye.
yeah, he's like, go tell our story. And then at the end, he like it shows the Battle of Salamis as it's starting the land battle. But he sends him home and all that. And like, if you think about it, like he's telling the story, of course it's all embellished. I mean, so it's not just a graphic novel. I don't like to look at 300 just a graphic novel movie. I like to look at it as that is the picture he's painting in the minds of the people he's inspiring.
Yeah.
So he's telling the story, saying like our brave 300 stood against the Persians, and then he even makes the Persians look worse than they were. Like they weren't, like
dude,
they weren't.
Dude, that movie, I'm gonna stop because I can go on such a tangent on that. You and I had a very similar high school experience from our previous conversations. But so in mind, as a senior, I snuck out to go see 300. It holds like a very special place. But if they had known, I would have gotten expelled. It was awesome. I came back into class and I was like, yeah, what? I just saw 300. but 300, the second movie too, is really good. Very rarely do I say a sequel's good, but Rise of an Empire, whatever it's called, it's so good.
I mean, I only don't like it because they make Themistocles look like a one man army badass.
Okay,
but,
all right.
And I know Themistocles is the general, and he wasn't. Anyway, we're not going to get off on that topic.
Yeah. Sorry. You brought up a great movie.
Yeah, no, seriously though, Clark, as our history expert here, how much of what is documented that we have to read, to look at, to decipher, how much of it do you think is, to what Bean said, was told or played by the telephone game? How much of it do you think is actually accurate, or how much of it was embellished, to say we won the war, we slaughtered their 4,000 guys and we only had 2 dudes and 1 horse and a stick? I mean, like how much of it is actually accurate?
Well, you mentioned earlier, the farther you back up, the worse it gets. That is absolutely true. The numbers are embellished. Everybody is more famous than they were. That's how they write it down. And yes, I agree with the adage that the winners write history. There's only one exception I can think of in history where the winners do not write the history, and that's the American Civil War. Definitely Jubal Early and the cult of Robert E. Lee. Definitely the South wrote the history of the Civil War. So that is the one time in history I can think of where the losers wrote the war.
My great-great-grandpappy.
Yeah. Definitely the losers wrote the history in that one. But no, as you go back farther, it definitely is that. Like I said, I even mentioned it in talking about this. Ramses II said that he took 120,000 Israelites prisoner after his conquest of Canaan. That is an absurd number. There's no way he took 120,000 people. Think about that number at this time and world populations.
Yeah.
It's inconceivable. Right. There is no possible way. That would have been the entire population of that area.
So you're saying like the way they wrote it was their battle drum for their civilization.
Yeah, even Alexander the Great in 336, Battle of Gaugamela, like he claims that he fought against I think he said the Persian army was like almost 1 million men, and he had 300,000. I think is what he actually had. And that's not even what he had like in the field. Like he had like 30,000 active men or something, and he fought an army of like 1 million. It's just the impossible numbers. They're impossible.
But that's the beautiful part, I think, of your topic about the Bronze Age, though, as we go and we dig into things, and by say dig, I mean literally dig, and we find things, and we find these tools, and we can carbon date them, and we can say it's approximately this old. I still, and I mentioned this before, but like the first guy that said, hey, copper and tin would be good together, right? Like for me, I find that fascinating as an engineer. But the things that we dig up out of the ground, whether it be coins, a sword, an axe, a boat, whatever else, seem to me to be the most truthful artifacts of history, because there's nothing written. It's just, it's an artifact. It's it's chisel marks, it's hammer marks, it's forge marks, it's the
It's
flutes of it.
tangible.
Perfectly said. It's tangible. I can see it, I can feel it, I can hold it, I can look at it, and I can make some. I mean, and look, let's call a spade here. You can make some assumptions about how it was made, and maybe, but I think for the most part we can tell when it was made. I think that's a fairly acceptable science at this point.
It's also location. It's composition in a location, and you
Correct.
can commendate at we know a time and a place, and that's
Yes,
important.
yes, and I think that's like, but I often wonder is a lot of that, and this is going to be a slap in the face almost to what we're talking about. Are those kind of things almost a more accurate and more important telling of history than a lot of what we have quote unquote written?
I would still say there are accurate documents. There's enough that we have that even with the embellishments, we at least know.
A general idea.
Yeah, so like even if you look at a stelae in like Egypt and it says I took X amount of prisoners and here's your, here's your like on a temple where it's like I've got this many prisoners and you see Ramses standing there and all this stuff and he's bragging about, it's almost like the Ozymandias, poem, like what does he ultimately be? Just a statue in the sand. But he's touting his greatness. But if you think about it, at least we know he is marking a battle. So we know this battle happened. And then that can lead us to the area and we can kind of go from there. There's always stuff that we can kind of figure out from there.
Can you also cross-reference different texts and kind of get a better idea?
Exactly. And that's another reason that I love a lot of people will outright dismiss the Bible as a document. It's not. The Bible is a historical document. It is a very important historical document.
Right.
And can bounce that off of people like Josephus, like, Roman historians, things like that. And we can find out a lot. Like my favorite parts of the Bible, this sounds crazy. And Seth and I have talked about this. Like I said, I grew up I went to a Presbyterian school for my entire, kindergarten through 12th grade. And I had to learn Bible history. I had to learn apologetics, and I had to learn modern thought. So like, but I appreciate it because when I went to college and became a history major, I had actually looked at the books Samuel, Chronicles, and Kings as a historical document, and not even Joshua, Judges. These are military historical documents. Like they're important because we can bounce them off of Assyrian and Babylonian documents of the same battles.
Right.
And we can really narrow it down and figure out a lot about how these campaigns were actually fought. You take, I hate to say you take God out of the equation, but yeah, you take God out of the equation for a second and we find out a lot about the movement of these people and how like this was done.
So, quick question on leading up to the point we're at now. What was the actual bronze trade like? Like, were they trading? Was it just something that one particular entity or region developed, and then that they held that like almost like extremely valuable tech, and they were like not sharing, or were they trading metals?
So yeah, once they found out that you could smelt copper and tin, and obviously you can make a lot of things out of it. You can make bowls, you can make you can make common things out of it. But armor and weapons, that was a big technological jump, obviously. And once you had places that had big deposits of copper or tin and things like that, now you had international trade routes. So these places started to get the early the early beginnings of like, okay, we can keep enough for ourselves. We also have agriculture. Like this is huge. Before this collapse, this is a time where the weather is beautiful. Everything is, like I said, working for all of these empires. Food is in surplus. Everyone is going to them. They're flocking to them because they need this. So you have food, and you have now, for the first time, you have people that you can actually internationally trade with and you have sea trade. I mean, the Bronze Age is pretty much defined by that. Is like the first time. So this is insane to think about. This is the invention of the wheel. It's that stupid how old we're talking about. It's only 3300 BC when it starts, but this is the refinement of the wheel. Like the wheel has only been proto done at this point. So it's the refinement of the wheel because agriculture, domestication of animals, now everything has become in surplus. So they need to find better ways to actually move things. So the wheel becomes a better thing. Chariots now, like I said, warfare starts to develop. Once you have the wheel, now you have better chariots, things like that. So, I mean, it's just an explosion. Like we can't think about it, but for them, it would have been the industrial age.
Yeah.
It would be like our 1800s that we look back at now and we're like, oh my God, everything explodes. And, now you can, think about warfare from the Civil War to World War One. I mean, look at that jump. It's just insane what we were able to do with that with the industrial age.
Yeah.
So here's like a question for you, and it's more of like understanding how you understand, like conceptualize, I guess, in your brain these points in time. Because when you say something like 330 BC or 550 BC or anything like that, in my brain, it's just
It's just a number. Yeah.
I can't, yeah, like I can't just picture that, visualize it, or put myself in that time frame, like how long ago. So as you're learning these materials and you're reading about these things, like how does that work for you?
Well, I mean, I generally love all history. I mean, obviously, I have my like specifications that I'm very into, but I think you have to pick landmarks and then kind of conceptualize around it. So, like I just said, 3300 BC, we're refining the wheel.
Right.
If you think about that, like the landmark of the Stone Age, and you have 200,000 years of Stone Age, and we think, what's the biggest thing they came up with? Fire. That's probably the biggest thing to come out of, the Stone Age. That and the domestication of animals. That's the two biggest things we really come up with in the Stone Age. We figure out fire is good, and we figure out that we can domesticate animals, and therefore we don't have to be nomads anymore. We can actually plant stuff and become agrarian.
I've always loved that word, nomad.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said. I mean, it's a great thing to be, and it's crazy to look at. See, and that's the thing about history is you gotta remember that this is not universal. So look at the Western Hemisphere. Native Americans never invented the wheel. You know why? There are no animals to pull it. Native American, like in the Western Hemisphere, there are no animals there are no animals to pull.
Nothing domesticated. Yep.
Yeah. There's nothing.
That makes sense. I never thought of that. Like, what would you do with a wheel when you're trekking and moving from place to place in small kind of like small town kind of pop-ups? Like, that would be pointless to have a wheel without a horse.
Yeah. And it's also why, like I said, in the Western Hemisphere, all Native American cultures were matriarchal societies.
Really?
And they had no concept of land ownership because none of this is important.
Right.
Yeah.
All of this is old world constructs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and back then, if they wanted to move something from place to place, they just built a travois and just dragged it. That's what they did.
Yeah.
That it was very simple, and that was very, very well understood. The concept of having something that was more efficient was not something that they ever thought about because they didn't need it.
Yeah.
And then with
it wasn't like a need for them for sure.
No, absolutely not. And with the Bronze Age and how it's interesting that the Bronze Age incorporates a period of time where you either had the technology. I mean, and there are places in Europe where they have found copper mines that were dug to 70, 80 meters in depth. I mean, that's something pretty impressive. I mean, can you imagine digging to 80 meters down?
Right.
With just your garage tools.
Well, with your Stone Era tools, if you're lucky,
Right.
But then when they come to a point when they're actually starting to trade in these things. And Clark is right. There was a lot of civilizations that ended up having an abundance of things. So going into a new place and saying, "Hey, look, I have this," and they were fairly smart about it. They weren't trading weapons and things like that, but they were trading very utilitarian things. They were trading various tools and things like that, but they weren't giving away their shields and their armor, you know. But that was a big piece of what extended the Bronze Age to different places. I mean, and I'll say again, Ireland is one of those where they got tools and things early on, but they did not have any concept of what could be done with it until they started to dig through the bogs and ended up finding their own stuff. And again, that's where the good old fashioned Irish flat axe came out, and that the Irish flat axe is a beautiful piece of history to me, just a beautiful piece of history.
This is the second time you brought that up. I want to know more, like at some point.
You're a beautiful piece of history too, bro.
Well, thank you, Ricky. Well, the reality of Ireland is covered in a lot of bogs, right? Yeah. And bogs are very good at preserving things. And so that's how they find a lot of these things,
including people.
Yeah, those are crazy. People. Why is their skin like silvery black by the time they unearth them? It's so creepy.
Oh, the bog mummies are so
yeah,
dope.
The bog mummies are insane.
Well, I think at that point they're just stained because it is
true.
Really black, like under there. So
it's crazy.
Got to be some sort of mineral compound that like just dyed their skin.
Yeah,
well, it's the same reason a good Scotch tastes good. It's the same reason.
It's terrible.
But what's crazy is if you look at like black and white photos of just like old dudes, that the bog dude that's like was apparently hung before he was shoved into the bog. It just looks like a black and white photo of an old dude. That is the creepiest kind of mummy. But all right, I'm done.
Well, before we get too off topic, I didn't want to avoid the question. So going back to, I guess the original thing, like before we went off on Western Hemisphere stuff, I didn't want to like what was the original question?
From who?
From Beans.
Oh, just like trying to figure out, I guess, like so that I can get a better understanding as we're talking about these things. Like, how do you, in your brain, conceptualize like
points.
these points? Yeah. So do you? Because the only thing that I can think to do for myself is just kind of like do the whole cross-referencing thing of like another event that might have happened around the same time simultaneously. And even then, it's a struggle if I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I think honestly, we're blessed at this point that we have so much documentation that if there's something you're interested in, you can find a point and then start from there. And if you really want to get like in depth, like you just have to kind of branch out from there. I mean, like I said, I know it seems archaic at this point in 2023. I have so many books. It's ridiculous.
No, I have like at least, I did at one point in time have like 800 books in my house, and then I lost a couple of boxes. So I don't know how many there are. So it's not archaic. It's how it should be. Books are everything.
How I feel. Nothing replaces actual books for me personally, but
Yep.
I mean, there's just so many references these days. Like if it's really just if you find something, somebody has already researched it. It's going to be really hard pressed to find anything.
A new topic to research.
Yeah, that you just stumble upon and you're like, oh, I'm the first one to actually come across this. So that's just how I feel about it.
That's fair.
Well, it's time, right? Oh, hold on. And the passage of time and people documenting time. I mean, that's really kind of what it boils down to. I mean, if you go down to brass tacks, I think the oldest calendar is like 7,800 or something like that. Maybe even 7,900 BC, the oldest calendar that anyone's ever like put into context. But true timekeeping and true passing of an age or a year, I think dates to around 3000 BC, and I think it was Sumerians, as I recall, that were the first ones that were like, we should do that, and that's where our calendar months come from. It was somebody added up how many days it took to get to the next obvious celestial event, and they said, okay, that's how many. So I think that's how time has been ticked off ever since, and I think we all basically have believe that, and that's just kind of what it is. I think the BC and the AD, I forget what AD stands for. It's like Anno Domini. There we go. And then BC is obviously before Christ. So it's
Wait, what is AD? What is AD again?
Anno Domini.
It's Latin for in the year of our Lord.
Yes, that. So that's I think the collegiately, universally accepted. That's when, that was year 0. That's where we started. So
it was a really good album.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but so I mean, to Bean's point though, to contextualize some of these passages of time is, I think, for a lot of people difficult. I think for the Western culture that we're in the United States, I think we can probably go back fairly safely 300 to 400 years and pretty well capitalize all that and make most of it make sense. But then and we said it before, the farther back you get, the more holes there are in it, right? And the harder it is to prove or to have written down or to say, yeah, this is where I was and this is my Uncle Bob here. My great Uncle Bob was at the Battle of whatever in 17 something. It's just it gets harder.
Well, it's so hard. It is so hard for our brains to conceive. Also, just going back 300 years, the British accent.
Honestly,
like the modern British accent did not exist 300 years ago.
Wow.
It's literally called the Victorian accent for a reason, because in the Victorian era, that's when people started changing their accent. So,
I mean, if you just separate the land a little bit, it illustrates it really well. The Irish accent and the British accent eventually just became the Southern accent.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what's funny is, like, if you watch the movie The Patriot and you hear all the British actors in that movie playing British soldiers and their accents, they would have actually sounded like Southern people, like modern Southern people. There's actually an island off the Chesapeake in Virginia that is very isolated, and they have what is considered the last remnant of the British accent. You should totally look it up. It's amazing.
They've recorded it?
Yeah, they recorded it.
Oh, shit.
And it's very weird because it's a Southern kind of twangy like accent. They're like, oh man, God, oh man. That's what it sounds like.
Wait, what did you say it was again? What island?
I can't. It's off the Chesapeake. Just look up like last original British accent or something in Virginia. If you search that, you will find it. I promise. And it's this little it's this little place in the Chesapeake where they have been basically untouched, and they just they sound like what British people sounded like when Jamestown was basically founded.
Wow.
And
that's you just blew me away.
Yeah. That's what the British accent sounded like in during the American Revolution. It did not sound anything like what British people sound like today.
We got to go back.
Tangier Island, NBA, I think is the name of the island. Tangier, yeah, that's what's coming up. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone can play that, if anyone can play that sound.
You want me to play it? I'll play it. I've kind of pulled up. Okay.
It's incredible to hear these people talk. It's crazy.
Did we lose Travis? Where did he go?
Yeah, he had to go.
Yeah, he had to bounce.
Okay. I peed and he was gone.
Yeah, he got attacked by kittens.
That is understandable.
He's being kitty daddy or something.
Yeah.
All right. You guys hear that?
Yeah, I can hear it. Are they singing?
They are singing. Hold on. Trying to get them talking.
I can him and you're Saturday night.
Yeah.
Dude, that is a dead split between Southern and what I think of as British.
Yeah.
Hold on, I gotta like listen to that again. 'Cause,
What
like,
I'll
my
do is
God, I
I'll
was having a
I
hard
think
time
I
understanding.
think Discord is
Now, about all of us that were born here on this island, we can say that our parents were born here, and our grandparents, great grandparents, great great grandparents, and right on down.
What amazes me is that I can be most anywhere. I can be in the mall in Salisbury, Maryland, for example, and I can hear Tan gentlemen talking in the crowd, and I can immediately tell, hey, they're from home, you know. Used to be like Claude them said.
This is like now my favorite accent.
Now they don't do that anymore. I think you get on top
They
of
do
the
that
sweet,
now.
but you ready to look. Instead of
That's
Dude, that's
amazing.
wild.
it's in between like sophisticated and hick. It's
Exactly.
crazy.
It's
Well,
awesome.
if they're on an island isolated, I think more than one of those gentlemen is probably married to his sister.
Probably.
Which is fine. I mean, but
No.
Hey,
No,
it's
man.
I have 8 cats. Biologically speaking, this does happen.
So that is what those people right there. That is what pre-Victorian English people spoke.
That is so
So
Wow.
during the
Wow.
American Revolution, only 300 years ago, like
You-
in 1770.
Wow.
You literally just shook me. I'm a bit shook.
What
I am
caused
too.
people during the Victorian era to change their accents?
Well, the Victorian
They
family.
wanted to understand each other. I don't
Well,
know.
they're also German, so they renamed themselves the Windsors. They actually are the Saxe Guthberg or Saxe Guth is what their actual name is. So they are of German descent, and Victoria's accent was different, and
Okay.
her
Okay.
English accent was different, and everybody got the proper English accent.
The
Yeah.
proper.
So they started
Okay.
start speaking from the front of the tongue instead of in the back of the mouth. Speaking from the front, and they get a professional sound instead of speaking
Speaking
from
the
the back of the tongue and being like this and like. So this is what they sound like back then,
No.
but they start speaking from the front of the tongue.
Whoa.
There's a little bit
the
of a
kings,
of an
old
R
boy.
roll in there too. At one point, they had like kind of like an R roll.
You
That's
know,
interesting.
you know what's great in this era of AI? I can take all of those accents from that island and sample it, and we can have an advertisement for both our podcasts in legit British. We
Oh,
would
yeah.
be the only ones.
Do it.
That's amazing.
Oh man. Salvage so much of our history. Clark, you literally just blew my mind. I know
For
what
real,
I'm going
I
to be
had-
doing tonight. I'm going to be Googling all about
I've
this
never heard
island.
of
Can
this.
hear accents.
I've never heard of this. This is amazing.
That's what I'm here for. It's all I'm good for.
Mind blown.
Yeah. Well, I
So
would.
to wrap
No,
up the,
honestly, like
Bronze
the
Age,
whole time I've just been sitting here quiet because it's like I'm if my teachers would have taught me history this way, I probably would have paid a lot more attention.
Oh,
well,
for
I
sure.
mean, it's meant to be fun. So
That's how. Yeah, but that's school for you. You know, I went to public school in Mamu. I know how it is.
Well, and yeah. Well, in Mamu, it was just like, here's a condom. These are the car keys. Don't ever put them together. That was because you could go out and get some ass. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
Conversation changed so much.
Well, it's crazy when you think about this era of time and you think about all of the things that people were learning. But also how little they were learning. You know, going from the sack of one place to the sack of the next place to the sack of it. Like nobody was actually learning anything. Nobody was understanding how we have to form societies and we have to let people just do their own thing. And just because they're across a river does not mean that we have to kill them. You know, it took so long for society as a whole. I mean, up until let's say the 1940s, for people to really learn that lesson. So I mean, there was so much that happened in between those two time periods.
But have we
But
though? Has that lesson been learned? Because I don't think that lesson's been learned.
Well, I think it
I think
hasn't
you
been
have
learned.
such a beautiful, like, optimistic perspective when we're talking in general of things, but like, I don't know, like, I
That
don't
is
think we've
literally
really
the first
learned.
time anyone's ever called me optimistic. So thank you for that. I appreciate
No,
it.
just
Um,
listening to what you were
There's
saying
other words
earlier,
we
like
could call them, but we'll go with optimistic because it sounds nice.
no, because like
It does.
you've been so optimistic. Like earlier, your point was like, you know, so that we can learn and everything. Like, whereas in my perspective, how I see just people and history and humans in general is we're never gonna learn. We're never gonna evolve to a point where we do not have to worry about plagues and falls and rises of societies, because in order for that to happen, I
No,
think the only way that it could happen is if we behaved as kind of like one, you know, sentient being, whereas individuality was lost. And because we will always be individuals, that's kind of like the
Well,
curse
but
of being human.
individuality should always be celebrated, but there's a reality to
Agreed.
that. When you walk out your front door, your individuality no longer matters. You're part of a whole. Okay? And that is the thing that I think is killing society right now, is that people put their individuality on their chest and they wear it out and they seem to want to defend it to the death. Okay?
Mhm.
And when that happens, we have the repeat of all of these things. You know, and I love my friends, I love my neighbors, whatever else. When somebody comes at me with something that it's like, how come you don't understand? It's like, well, it's because I don't understand. You know, so don't hate me because I don't. Why don't you just take a minute and stop and tell me? You know?
Right.
And that's what people are not doing. People are not bothering to stop and tell, and
Mhm.
other people are not stopping to bother to understand. And that is what is driving as our society goes. And as Clark has been telling us, history has taught us this. When you go through this shit and you don't bother to stop and understand, we just keep driving the wedge further and further down. And it doesn't suit anybody, because ultimately we have whole societies that fail because nobody stopped to bother to say, oh, these guys like cows, well, we like sheep better. You know, it's like it, but that's the whole thing. And so we find these ultimately super derivative and pointless things to like fight about.
Mhm.
And in today's society, it has never been more prevalent that we find stupid fucking things to fight about. And it's like, I would just, I would rather come to your house and have a barbecue and sit and talk to you than I would fight with you, because
Mhm.
I think we can gain more from that. But people honestly, they're simple, they're stupid, and they're fucking lazy. And it's easier to fight than it is to bother to take a second to understand your neighbor.
For sure, for sure. But you know, that's kind of like where I go back to like the whole, I guess, perspective of your we're always going to repeat history, because that's something about human nature that's not going to change. You know, like
Mhm.
there's nothing you, I, or anybody else can do to get all of us under the idea of like, hey, let's not argue about dumb shit and differences, and let's just work
right.
towards, you know, a cohesive, you know, functioning society that's efficient.
Even
You know, that's
no
just
one's ever going to
unfortunately not going to
stay.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah, no one's
Even
ever going to stay convinced long enough to make anything really happen.
but that
Unfortunately, you
is,
know, unfortunately, because you also have greed, you have
Ever.
agendas, you
Right.
have, you know, biases as well. Like there's so many things that come into play that's just within innate of being human that's gonna never allow that to happen.
yeah,
We
but
keep
that
losing
The
is,
real
stuff.
world is cosmic
You
horror.
okay?
yeah, but that is society's epic fail right now.
For
That is
sure.
society's colossal epic fail,
Yeah,
because we have never in history.
actually, it's not societies. It's our species is
Yeah, it's
Human
humanity.
flaw.
failure.
For
Yeah,
sure.
Humanity's
For
I'll
sure.
go with that. I'll go with that. But
Yeah,
I'll say this.
it's our
Never.
fundamental failure.
I think you're right, but I would also say this: never in the history of time have we been more connected, more able to reach out and talk to somebody, and yet we don't fucking
And
do
look
it.
how far away we are from each other and
Mm.
unconnected we are.
Yeah, we're
That's my
driving
point.
away
Yeah.
now because we have
Yep.
this.
Mhm.
If it's not even worse, you know.
But no, I had a coworker. This was a few years back, but I broke this poor girl's heart, and I felt bad about it afterward because I didn't think about it. Like I said it, and then afterward I was like, oh, I just shattered this poor girl's universe. She talked to me, and she was just like, She was talking about it. I think it was around 4th of July, and she was talking about how great America was. She's like, America's, the greatest country ever. And I was like, eh. I just kind of shrugged my shoulders, like, eh. She goes, you don't believe that? And I said, well, I don't believe that America's going to do something that no other civilization in history has ever done. And that's survive and go on. And she was like, what do you mean? And I was just like, every civilization falls. I was like, no one's ever made it that far. I was like, no one's ever persisted. And she just looked at me and she was just like so dejected. And I was like, oh man, I didn't mean to like break your heart about this, but yeah, America is going to fall one
You
day.
just sit on her so hard.
Yeah, I was like,
Well,
Line of the Empire.
I don't mean it's tomorrow, but
Well,
Damn,
that's
bro. Look at
Right,
images.
but it's going to happen, and that's
Yeah.
just the eventuality.
yeah.
well, that's the saddest part of our country and all the freedoms that we have been allotted. Those freedoms have left us in a place that where we don't understand the price that freedom comes at, and we all just do and say and whatever the hell we want. We don't understand that we are part of a social, moral contract that at the very least, we have to get up every day, do our part, and be nice to each other. But that's the part that we've lost.
Yeah.
Nobody cares.
Grindhouse wants us to wear 3-piece suits on an airplane and when we go to the dollar store. So that's the
Well, first of
get
all,
out.
I don't go to
Get
the
out.
dollar store, but on the airplane, yes, I think you're right. But but I mean, if you look at things contextually, and you look at how we go out in the world and how we present ourselves, people don't give a shit anymore. And
Oh, we're all in yoga pants and pajamas.
Hell no, we don't give a shit.
Well, but when you don't give a shit about yourself and how you project yourself to society, when you don't give a shit about how the person next to you perceives you, and you don't give a
That's the
shit,
part I don't give a shit
and
about.
well, but my point is that when you don't give a shit and don't give a shit and don't give a shit and don't give a shit, that is what makes your society crumble.
Grindhouse,
Bullshit.
I
And I'll
have
agree
already.
with that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I don't know if I'm lagging or not. I just lost
No, you're
power.
fine.
Long story. But Grindhouse, I because of you and our talk a few days ago, I've uninstalled
Means you're good. You're open.
TikTok.
You're green. Go for it.
That
Green.
is awesome. That is awesome.
Well, oh wait,
Green
I'm
light.
green. What are you talking about, Clark? I'm green.
Means you're good.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm confused. I have no power in my entire neighborhood. I go outside and it's pitch
Wow.
black.
This is great dead
And
air.
Oh no.
quick
I'm gonna stare
question.
off
I
at
hate
all of you. Let's do this.
I hate to talk shop, Clark, but are you recording on the
Seth lost
roadcaster?
power, by the way. While we're doing dead time, I might as well tell you. Seth lost power. That's why he's
Can he not hear me?
absent
I
here.
don't think he can hear you.
Yeah, tell
I
tell
can hear him.
Clark for me. Yeah, tell Clark for me. This has happened before. He every now and then, whenever I disconnect, for some reason Clark can't hear
Seth
me.
isn't talking now.
Mhm.
Nobody's talking.
He's
Yeah.
talking to us right now. He's
Yeah.
saying that
Oh
he's,
shit!
you're not hearing him. It's a thing. Apparently, it happens
this
every now and
happens.
then when he
I gotta leave-
disconnects.
I gotta leave.
He's
the
got like
room
no
so I can
power
hear him.
at all.
Yeah, he's hoping that you're recording, and he also said that you have a little dick. I'm not sure what that's about.
I don't know about the little dick thing, but I have not been recording. He's gonna be very upset with me. He's probably
Uh-oh.
gonna be more upset.
Oh,
Oh.
are you
Probably
fucking
gonna be
kidding
more
me,
upset
Clark?
with the recording. Than
He said, "Are you
Oh,
fucking kidding me,
no.
Clark?"
All right. Well,
Craig's in here, though.
Craig
We'll be
is
all right.
recording. Craig is recording, but
Yeah.
I don't.
You
The
gonna forgive me
problem
for my
is
dick,
if
though?
anybody's internet is lagging, it's going to be off sync. It's fine. Anyway,
Still can't hear him, so you gotta tell
Grindhouse.
me.
Yes.
All right,
Okay,
I gotta
I
leave.
tell
Somebody
him
just told me
after
you guys to talk to him
tell
or something.
tell him after
All right,
I
I gotta
say
leave and
this,
come
I'm
back
gonna shut
so
up
I can hear
quicker.
him.